Well, looky there. What a fine evening this is. We got the whole crew here. And a matter of fact, Susan commented, just put a comment up there. I just saw it pop into my alert here. So the answer to your question, Susan, is they're all back tonight. So a big welcome for everybody. I have to confess, I missed everybody. It was lonely here. Holy smoly. So anyway, this is Capt and the crew with our weekly Fearless Flight Live Facebook show, in which we talk about things that people who are trying to overcome their fear of flying would be interested in. People who know somebody who's afraid to fly, and also people who are just interested in airplanes and flying and chatting about it. So first things first, we always start out by talking about our Facebook group, and I'll bring a slide up here in just a minute. We have 873 members. We're growing literally daily, and we like to see that, and we like to see the interaction amongst all of you out there. It's a warm and friendly, user-friendly group, and we encourage you to join if you have not joined. During the evening, if you would, feel free to put a comment out there. We've got people monitoring it, unlike weeks when I was by myself and couldn't master that skill. Yeah, and tonight I'm just going to remind you all of the Clear for Takeoff 201, the new online 201 class that's in progress. There's still time to join. We've had one class, but I've got we record the sessions, and so that's up in the replays. And if you still want to join, whether you want to fly with us on December 11th from Phoenix to Ontario and back, or if you just would like, you live somewhere where that's not going to be or it's not going to be possible, you can just take the class. And we'll have a link here that Dieter will post later on there. So let's go around the horn. So, So Diane, you've been working, and you were playing a little bit. You had a little bit of vacation.
I had a little bit of vacation. My annual Bridge Ladies, we don't call them that though, reunion. It was our 22nd reunion. We were in Hilton Head Island, and then I got up to see my brother who lives just outside of Charleston. And that was wonderful. And my oldest grandchild came and visited me this past weekend. And right now I'm flying. This is the real glamorous part of being a flight attendant. I'm in a hotel room in Medford, Oregon. And I have to get up tomorrow morning at 3:30 in the morning because the van leaves the hotel at 4:30 because our flight leaves shortly after 5. So this is the glamorous part, but I am so glad to be back to see everybody.
Hey, we're glad to have you. And Eric, you too have been gone. What have you been up to?
Well, I felt sort of bad, in a bad sort of way, that I bailed on Ron right after he got well, and he had 2 podcasts and 2 live shows. And nevertheless, I went to Cozumel for
You'll get over it.
I got over it. I went to Cozumel for 8 days with our diving vest buddies and put about 10 dives in the water and hung out on the island and caught the weather right. And the ocean was beautiful. Haven't been in for 2.5 years, and I'm fairly familiar with it. So it was a very nice time, a very cathartic experience. And I'm waiting for somebody to come over and clean my gear. And I'm starting to give up hope.
And do the laundry.
Yeah.
And we all have something in common. We have all flown in the last week.
Yes.
So and quite a bit, relatively speaking. So Eric, you were talking about an experience you had boarding the airplane that you thought might be of interest to some people.
I'll make it real quick. A lot of you guys mentioned the claustrophobia, and you don't like the boarding part, and so on and so forth. And this happened to me, and it reminded me when we went down the jetway in Houston. We walked down there, and somebody stopped in the aisle somewhere. So a bunch of us tromped down the jetway and stopped near the end of it where we get on the airplane. And so there was a horrible groan from the jetway, and it lurched quite a bit. And everybody looked around nervously at each other like, that's normal, right? And it is when you pile up a bunch of weight down in the front of the jetway. As we've mentioned before, if you look out the window at it, it has that one big whip piston with the screwy wheel on the bottom that rotates through 360 degrees. And when you put a lot of weight in the front, the jetway auto leveler will pressurize that piston more to keep it correctly lined up with the door. And if you happen to be there when it makes an adjustment, it doesn't move much. It's a leveler, but it makes quite a noise and vibration, and it's an extremely unnerving thing. And I just want you to be aware of that when we go down as a class, or you go down, if you get bottled up near the front of the airplane, that's a distinct possibility that you could hear that and feel that.
The difference in the weight on the airplane, if you have 150 passengers, so is 30,000 pounds. So from the time they start the first person boarding till they get the last person on, if you didn't have that, you'd have about a foot step between the jetway and getting on the airplane. And that's why they don't do it. And I usually talk about that in the 101 class about the lurch, because it is a shock to people down there. Dear, you've been gone the longest and flew the furthest.
Yes, I call it my family expedition. So both of my parents in Austria, they faced some different, rather difficult health challenges. So we decided to pack up here, leave our kids here, and go to Austria. And boy, traveling in international travel, especially from Canada and back into Canada, if you have a fear of flying, there are so many things that keep your mind on just a check-in process and everything. It certainly has changed quite a bit on international travel. So yeah, quite the experience.
So are the requirements for Canada more stringent than the US right now?
Yeah, to give you an idea, it actually cost us 2 days, and that's how stringent they are, because Canada also requires you to have a valid PCR test. And PCR tests, usually the results in Austria, you used to get them in 24 hours or less. And but Europe in general has a much higher infection rate these days again, and I think globally is kind of like the epicenter right now. Yeah. So all these testing stations required much longer, and there were server issues. So long story short, we didn't get our test results in time to board our flight. So we had to actually just hours before cancel and find a different solution. And thank God Lufthansa was able to rebook us just 2 days later, and we got another test and made it just in time. So
but they probably try to help you out and all that, but you're really kind of on your own, right? If you can't make the flight. Yeah,
you really are. And I mean, I don't know how the rules again have changed in US domestic travel, but I mean, as far as rebooking and no fee changes and stuff like that, that's still available that I saw when I booked the international flights, to and from Austria. That's available. So I don't know how that is in domestic when something COVID related happens, but
you're pretty much the same thing. It's like any cancellation or irregularity, and it's, I mean, as a non-aviator or non-airline experienced person, most passengers think that, well, if my flight gets canceled or something, they'll just move me on to the next one. But no, not so much, because if that's full, people will go instead. So, and we mentioned last week we had a couple of guests on. Marcia Brighter had flown from Miami up to her daughter's wedding in Boston, and I'll just rehash this a little bit for people who weren't there. And one of the things she had happened to her, actually I had two fearful flyers that this happened to, is the airline, in this case it was Delta. They sent out a message the day before because we had that big nor'easter storm up there, and so they were expecting a lot of disruptions. And what they did is they said, hey, we've got a lot of weather coming in tomorrow, and so if you'd like to reschedule your flight, feel free to do so, and we'll waive any change fees that we would normally assess on that. And so what happened, and this goes along with when pilots just say, hey, we've asked the flight attendants to take their seats because there's an area of turbulence. coming up. If they don't provide some other information, in this case, the email, Marcia called me right away and says, hey, where should I go? Because now they're telling me that there was going to be a big storm and stuff like that. And her perception was that now the airlines have immediately dropped their standards. The pilots no longer give a rat's bum about flying safely. And they think that they're going to take undue hazards and risk with that. And the point is what they're doing is they're trying to be proactive, so that and let you know that if you continue to fly, you could end up in LaGuardia on your way to Boston and then be on the ground with 15 other flights that were going to Boston. And that could delay your plans, and you might end up getting there a day late or something like that. So it's not about compromised safety standards. It's about, it's partly for them to help ease the burden, and partly for you. And so I said, if you're comfortable and you've got some slack in your schedule, feel free to go. And so she was totally relaxed, and she jumped on the flight and she got there on time without any delays. Because, and this is the thing I think is worth mentioning, no matter how much people in the news media and the airlines and the weather service talk about it, your odds of being disrupted really still are really, really small. Eric, how many times in your career did you ever land at an alternate airport because of weather at the destination?
I'd have to sit here and think about it. It can't be more than 5, and it may not be 5.
Yeah.
In 30 years.
I have twice in 2.5 years.
Well, you're way ahead of the curve because I know. Yeah, but that's my point too. Is I'll bet you. I certainly didn't approach a dozen, and probably more than a half dozen like that. So, despite the fact that we fly all the time, the disruptions just to that level. We might have held a turn or two, something like that, going into Boston in the weather. I remember doing that one night, but other than that, it's really normal. I'll contrast Mary's experience, or Marcia's experience, with another person's experience who got the same letter. She was going to LaGuardia, and she was going on United. United sent a letter out with the same kind of context, and she didn't call me right away. She panicked and said, "Oh, I'm not going now." Because it just elevated her stress level, and no, I mean, I can't fault her for that, but it's you want to check it out with us or in the group or something like that, if that comes up there. All right.
I have a question quickly, because it also seems to be relevant. The Airbus 350, is that a plane that's also, are you guys, have any of you flown that one? Because that was my first time flying the brand new one, and oh my God, that is.
You were on an A350?
Yeah, that was a sweet in-flight experience. I mean, just I realized a lot of what you said is the anxiety before you even get on. But as far as this new aircraft, it's amazing.
What did you know? What did you know?
Seat configurations too. So
what did you notice, Dieter? What were the things that stood out to you?
Well, first of all, an extremely the sense of the cabin. It feels extremely spacious. So roomy,
roomier.
A lot of design.
That's a difference. When you say Eric, that's a difference between the design in Boeing and the hull size is a little bit larger on an A320, which is equivalent to a 737. So you get it even in the front, even the cockpit, you get a sense of more spaciousness. So I'm sure that they played out in the back there as well.
I was just gonna Google it. A bunch of the U.S. carriers have orders, but I don't know if they've converted any yet. I was going to say maybe only Delta, and I don't even know that. I was just getting ready to Google if Delta has any. Nobody else has any A350s here. And yes, it is an extremely capable, extreme long-range airplane with all the latest bells and whistles. It's really fancy.
And the takeoff and the landing. Sorry, Diane?
I was just Googling it too. So far, I see the same thing. It's just Delta.
Yeah, the takeoff and landing experience, like that is to me one of the, when I think of flying, there's this period of where you get really pushed in a seat, and it's like this, especially on a 737 takeoff. But with this airplane, with this aircraft, you can feel the power, and you can feel but it felt so effortless. It was ridiculous. Like it just, and landing, I mean, maybe great pilot, or, we had a fairly uneventful, like from a weather perspective, flight. There were some turbulence. Apparently it also has that technology that's supposed to smooth out the washboard effect from the turbulence. And we had some coming into Newfoundland, Labrador, where you sometimes get these heavier ones, and it was really, really buttery smooth, even in that. It was amazing.
Hey, Ron, can I interject for 30 seconds? One of our pencilhead buddies at work that did get rated on the A350 in the anticipation, very senior check airman.
Now you got to explain that. You got a few terms in there. You got pistol-headed buddies and got rated. We gotta keep.
Stop.
I'm gonna leave for a minute.
Not pistol-head, pencil-head. A nerd.
Oh, pencil-head. Got it. Yeah.
And
they got rated. You might want to explain that.
They got qualified in the A350 because it was assumed that they would be the lead check airman on the airplane, the head instructor instructing the other instructors when they thought we were going to take delivery. So they got to go to Europe and get qualified in the airplane. Sorry, thank you for straightening me out of that. I should have ripped through it so fast. But
and American
college. Jim here, because Jim, Singapore Airlines, Qatar Airlines, Cathay Pacific, Delta, and Lufthansa are the ones that are currently operating the A350. So thanks, Jim, for that.
So I asked,
before we let Eric finish, and I was just going to throw in there that the A350 is a 2-engine airplane, and we've talked about that, how they're getting rid of the 4-engine. And Emirates announced last week, I believe, they're retiring their first A380, which is they're not that old. And we got a question coming up on how long can they fly? Well, the A380 not very long because it's too fuel inefficient. So go ahead.
So my buddy that got rated, qualified on the airplane, I said, I can't tell you his name, his initials are Tom. I said, hey, Tom, what is the most stunning feature of this thing? And he didn't have to think very long. And he said, if you are flying along on autopilot and the airplane becomes depressurized, has a rapid depressurization, it gives the pilots 5 to 7 seconds to react correctly to it. And if they don't, the airplane immediately deploys oxygen mask, retards throttles, makes a right 90-degree turn off an ostensible track or airway, deploys speed brakes, and starts diving down at idle to 10,000 feet by itself. And he said, if that isn't cool enough, if there's another airplane below it while it's automatically flying the depressurization profile, the traffic avoidance system that Ron and I have talked about, the TCAS, if it picks up another airplane that's anywhere near it in the dive, it will alter the flight track in the dive to miss the airplanes on the way downhill. All while the 2 pilots are slumped over, completely freaking out of it. It'll do this, and they'll wake up at 10,000 feet and go, man, how did we get down here? This doesn't look so good.
That's amazing.
That automatically. It is.
I believe it also manages their 401ks.
Yeah.
Does it make coffee and serve Coke?
Yeah.
No, that is not. The Flight Attendants Union is too strong. They do not do that.
So
all right.
Since we opened that can of whoop ass, just one last question there from the Facebook comments. What do you guys, and I'm gonna ask all of you, what do you think of the Airbus A321? Because Megan is gonna fly on one of those, and she's wondering if it's as good of a ride probably as that brand new A350.
Megan, you're going to have that A321 for lunch. It is going to be such a good ride for you. Yeah. Not even a factor. It's the equivalent of a Boeing 737, 700, 800, 900. It's the other the alternative competitive manufacturer, to Boeing, and it's a great airplane. It's been around how many years now, Eric? We probably 20.
couldn't guess, but the 321 is a newer gen than the 320s and 319. So those are all even newer. They're very nice. They're very nice. They're a very nice airplane.
And this all fits into in just a couple of minutes. We're going to talk about the age of an airplane, how long it lasts, because that's one of the questions that is coming up tonight. Okay, so we mentioned the birds of a feather, and I want to give special recognition to Sonia. She went with me, or I went with her and her husband. She was one of my elite coaching students this weekend. We flew to LA and back, and she broke my heart, actually, just crushed it. We flew over to LA, and you could see how well she was doing. She was totally amazed. She hadn't flown in 9 years. Turns out she had actually come. She was one of the first people to ever come to the Clifford takeoff classes when I took over around the year 2000. And I took over in 2000 from the fellow that had started the program. And in 2003, we figured out. And I actually, we had a bunch of fun reconnecting anyway. But anyway, she did great. We come back, we land, we pull it into the gate. And I turned, and I knew, I sensed it. I looked at her, and she said, "Ron, I have to confess." And I said, "You're going to dump me, aren't you?" Because we'd had this plan. She's got to fly. Her sense of urgency was flying over the Christmas holidays to Chicago because her daughter is having her first grandchild. And she said, "Ain't no way I'm missing that." And that provided her why, which is the biggest reason why people do this, why they get over it. And so I said, "Well, here's a backup plan. Let's do the LA turn. And then if you still think that, you might want me to go with you, well, you just get me a ticket, and then you can turn the ticket in if you don't go." And so when she turned to me, I said, "You're going to dump me, aren't you?" And she said, "Yeah, I hate it." And I knew she did fabulous. So I've flown with 15 people over the last couple of weeks who have gone from grounded to fearless. And it's just really amazing. I'm telling you guys, you've just got to be perseverant and committed to this. It's all it takes. And there's her husband, Tony, up there. They both had a great time. We had a great time talking about it. Here's a reminder. This is the date of the actual graduation flight, or Clifford Takeoff 301, which comes on the heels of the 201 class, which is in progress. It started last Thursday. The second webinar will be this coming Thursday. There's still time to get into it, and Dieter's gonna post the link up there. Most importantly, get over there. This is from today, so the tickets are still down there in the range where even I could afford them, but they will be climbing up there. You can see this middle fee price there. That's what they're going to eventually. So if you wait long enough, you'll end up paying that much more for them. So if you want to go in the class, make sure you buy those tickets if you want to fly with us. And then I'll show you the link here. There's the link, and Dieter will put that in the notes afterward. And you go over there and make your intentions known through the enrollment form. And I will personally follow up with that and make sure that you get enrolled in the class. And as I said, there's a replay available of all the classes that we've done. This is what it looks like when you when you go click on the link. You go over to this site that says questionnaire, and it'll take your information. This is a thing. When I did that, one of the things that kind of helped me a lot, and many of you probably have seen that the ABC Nightlines broadcast from 2014 when the Malaysian Air 370 flight disappeared. And one of the things, of course, the news asked me, the interviewers asked me, they said, "You think they'll ever find it?" I said, "I will guarantee that they will find that wreckage sometime in history." I said, "It may take 50 years. And as it turns out, didn't take quite that long. We're looking at 7 or 8 years, possibly right now. And Eric and I were looking at this thing, and it is simply amazing. I mean, even I had kind of given up hope on that, but Eric and I were talking about it. A guy who has wrinkles in his brain where I don't even have smooth places came up with a way to find it out. So explain what these little squiggly lines mean, Eric. How are they proposing that they're going to find this wreckage?
So, Ron, do you remember who that guy works for? He was an electrical engineer by training, but I can't remember who he works for.
I don't.
But he is not a pencil head, a maximum nerd. And there was a program developed in 1999, used by scientists, students, amateur radio people that can detect what they call WSP, weak signal propagation. And essentially what it does, the way they explain it in the article, is a little bit like laser beams going across the floor of an art museum. And when you let yourself in after hours to relieve them of your favorite sculpture and you cross certain laser beams, not only does it set off alarms, it tracks your path of where you went to get the sculpture. Well, what happens is in these big shot global flying airplanes has a radio, a very old technology radio or combinations of them called an HF radio, high frequency. And all it is an AM radio jumped up to extreme power, but it works very, very well. And even when the pilots aren't transmitting, the HF radio is propagating a light signal because of the power. And for when the controllers, what we call ping the airplane or signal the airplane to talk to them, it automatically responds before you transmit. And there are pictures of lines on here of where controlling agencies send these signals out. And when this airplane went across these lines, it left a track or evidence of a point where it went. And the engineer doing this was able to pinpoint the track of this airplane. And so far along all the tracks where he has points, it also matches the IMSAT imagery where they know the airplane was, but he has all the details filled in, including down here in the lower left corner, a deal where the airplane held, to make the mystery even deeper, held for 22 minutes before it left the hold and continued off out into the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean. And this guy is predicting that he will have the point, the exact point where the flight ended at the end of this month, that he'll be done with this data, which is beyond incredible. But that's what he says.
So they took some of the oldest technology in aviation, and they mirrored it with the newest and boldest computer programming, and used basically triangulation, right, Eric, to form each one of these little points, and that's how they got the ground track. And that was the problem, is when they left the coast there up towards the upper center of the page, they had no idea where they went after that, and so they had the whole Indian Ocean to choose from. And this will, I'm so confident that they will actually be able to pinpoint the area in which to focus the search, and they'll find the wreckage, and they'll find out. We'll know someday what happened on that airplane to a lot greater degree. Okay, moving on December 5th, not going to have an in-person 101 class like I do, but we are going to have on the 4th of December, but we are going to have on the 5th an online Clear for Takeoff 101. Just want to let you know that. Okay, we got a few questions here. These are compliments of Scott Robertson, and want to thank Scott for this. He's got a whole bank of them, and we can't even do them all in one show here. But he wanted to know, and oddly enough, we were talking about the lifespan of a plane. So what is the lifespan of an airplane, and how much how much do you risk if you're flying older airplanes? And I'm just going to open it, Eric, by saying it's not your old 49 Ford, and with the rust on the rocker panel from driving on the salt roads up in East Snowshoe. No,
East. You're on the right track. East Overshoe, Wisconsin.
East Overshoe, Wisconsin. Yeah. So the main difference with airplanes is we replace parts that don't need replacing, and they go through an exhaustive maintenance cycle and schedules all the way up to and including the what we've talked about before, the D check, which they pull the airplane into the hangar, they pull all the parts that are removable, panels off the wings, and they X-ray it and do things like ultrasound and electronic skin testing. So that's why they can fly for long periods of time. That's why it doesn't add significantly to the risk. The reason that they most often change from older models to newer models is because of economics. The same kinds of logic that you use when many of you get rid of your old cars. You decide that you'd rather put money in a new payment and not maintenance, in a new car and get rid of the old car where you might have it paid for, but now you're looking at costlier maintenance. And we don't maintain it the way that you don't maintain your car. And that is, we don't wait until it quits running and then we go get somebody to fix it. Now, we don't do it because that's not legal in the airlines. We have to replace it on a schedule. And I've said this before, that if you maintain your automobile to the same level of readiness and reliability that we maintain airplanes, it'd cost you the equivalent of the price of your vehicle when it was new every year. It's very expensive. Anything to add, Eric?
I would say all of that, and I'll stick my neck in the noose and say the most extensive monitoring of the airlines by the FAA is the maintenance quality, parts tracking, inspection cycles, that kind of thing. They're watching the airlines very, very closely on that. And in that photo example, you might say, well, there's a 1947 DC-3, one of the most awesome airplanes ever built. And if it was still an airliner operating, the second question will be, well, how much of it is original? And the answer would probably be none of it. It's everything's been rebuilt, replaced, everything so many times. But it's a 1947 DC-3. Yeah, that's when it was originally built, but none of those parts remain anymore. Those are all new. And that would be an honest answer.
What year were you born, Eric?
56.
That airplane there came out a year before you were born. That is a B-52. That is the backbone of the triad of the United States nuclear defense policy. And that airplane was first put into service. Actually, they flew prototypes in 54, but the first one went into service in June of 1955, a year before Eric was born. So that tells you, if they can keep that sucker flying, and it's been in combat and through all kinds of things, in airplanes aren't like automobiles.
And it's the star of my favorite movie, Dr. Strangelove.
There you go. So another question Scott had was, how rare is it to hit an unexpected pocket of air? He at least didn't say air pocket, because we could have made more fun of it then. But when the seatbelt sign is off, okay, and there's a little cartoon there you can barely see it, but they flew through something that looks like a pocket. Okay,
it came off the pants.
So what is an air pocket, Eric?
No, isn't that a picture of one? I really,
yeah, there you go.
You kind of throw me under the bus. I really don't know what a pocket in the air is.
Yeah, well, there isn't one, and you're right in that. And so, but that's what people have called it, and all it is a place where the airflow, the velocity of the air, which is the speed and the direction, changes. And when you do that, it's just like going down a river, and where you have another river coming in from the side, or where the current goes over rocks or some other obstruction, and it causes it to be turbulent. And that's what an air pocket is. And so the question really isn't about that. It's about how rare is it to hit an unexpected turbulence. I'm going to say if you talk about coming out of nowhere, it's pretty rare. Wouldn't you say, Eric and Diane? Because we have other airplanes flying up there. We have weather reports ahead of time. So the pure total surprise of that, is rare. But when it happens, it gets your attention.
And I bet in the high 90% of when you do that, it's really not an air pocket. As in the diagram. It's somebody's wake that you went over and didn't see, just bang, bang, a quick speed bump in the air, and it's over, and you didn't see it, didn't know it was there, but you whacked it. And probably in the high 90% of what people would think is an air pocket is just hammering through a wake.
Yeah. And the wake turbulence happens most often sometime closer to takeoff or closer to landing, when the airplanes are slower and they're generating more lift or higher lift. So go ahead, Diane.
No, I've experienced wake turbulence twice. And as far as that unexpected air pocket, we've hit it a couple times and I've gone, whoops, but that's about it. So not really 2.5 years.
And the wake turbulence is probably the most probably the most surprising, and it happens so suddenly, and it really grabs your attention. So the next one that Scott had was, what are the risks if you do get trapped in a big storm? Again, it's like when they close the door. You willingly volunteered to be in that airplane. We didn't trap you. We didn't throw a piece of beef in there, and then when you went in there like some starving animal, we closed the door behind you. So we don't consider ourselves being trapped in a big storm, and the way we avoid that is because of our weather radar display. So there's two systems here. You can see one up to the right and one down on the left there in the left lower. And you can see where the airplane is there. The further out that you detect it and come up with a plan, the less the amount of extra distance you're going to have to travel. If this airplane down here in the lower left, if he waits till he gets right in here somewhere, he kind of worked himself into a group there. But pilots don't do that. Why would we want to do that? Because we know that if you have this much activity out there and you work your way in here, the likelihood is that those will continue to grow and that gap will close in there. So we, in this case, it's easy. He could just alter his course to the right there, or up here similarly go through there. And we look for usually about 20 miles as a minimum from anything that's red out there. And I don't know, what else can we say, Eric, about planning and avoiding getting trapped?
The air traffic controllers see that, the other airplanes see it. We have two radars in the airplane. If one radar fails, we can see it with the other radar. I've never heard of both radars failing in flight. If neither radar works, the airplane can't leave the ground into any area of known or forecast thunderstorm activity. So it's just not really within the realm of any kind of reality that you're going to find yourself in that kind of situation where you cannot see that weather and have the ability to avoid it.
And this will be the last one we'll do for this evening here. Can a plane handle tornado forces? And if anyone's out there, raise your hand or put a comment in the comments section there if you would willingly go forward and fly through that particular weather phenomenon. I saw one of these when I was 6 years old. And believe me, it made an impression on me. But even I did not have to see that at 6 years old to know that we just don't mess with that. So can a plane handle tornado forces? I'm going to say absolutely not. But the point is, we don't fly through those areas. And for however large you can have a thunderstorm develop, maybe, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5 miles across, sometimes in the really severe parts of it. A tornado is highly localized. It's close to the ground, and it's going to paint on the radar, and we're just not going to do that. There, I can't imagine being in my Boeing 737 having this vantage point of a tornado in the first place. I've done something really, really wrong to be headed this way, this low, where I can see those telephone poles alongside the road there. It's going to be one of those things to put down in your scrapbook and write home about if you survive it. But nobody that I know would ever do something like that.
And we know the answer to that is no. It makes me kind of homesick for Iowa years ago.
Yeah.
But when the reason we know the answer is no, I had the occasion to see a few unfortunate airports with the airplanes securely tied down outside. And then the airplanes that the airplane owner loved more, or the airport owner loved more, would be inside in the hangars. And then the airplanes tied down outside would have low self-esteem because they didn't rate a hangar. And the tornado would come through and rip the tar out of all the airplanes outside, just smash them to cat food cans. And as soon as it was done with that, it would go through the hangars and rip the hangar to smithereens and still destroy all the airplanes that were in there anyway. And you couldn't tell the hangar parts from airplane parts. So they all got creamed if it was right in the track where the tornado went. And I saw that a couple times on the ground many decades ago.
Yeah. So next week we'll talk. Coming up, he's got some other questions on turbulence, things like that. We'll talk about how we know what forces an airplane can handle and all that. So just a kind of a closing comment about, we'll check in with Dieter here in a minute, see if we got any last minute questions, but it is the season to be traveling and flying. So I've noticed an increase in activity here. If you have any doubts about what to do, if you're nervous about flying, please take advantage and schedule a 15-minute coaching session for free, and at least get some ideas about what you're up against and maybe get some kind of a plan of attack. If you don't do anything different, you're probably going to get what you've always got, and that's a lot of anxiety, disappointment, and more misery to your experiences with flying. You know, follow in the footsteps of a lot of other people that you've seen here on Fearless Flight Live, and that is do something. And because there's no need for you to be out there and to be anxious when you're flying on an airplane. We're living proof that you can fly for many years, and the only thing you got to show for it is maybe a few more wrinkles in your face there, like I do. But we welcome you to engage us however you might, and keep coming back every week. Any final questions or anything, Dieter?
No, just well, there were a couple of different questions to maybe one of them we can end with. So maybe Diane, Eric, go first, and we'll just end with that last question.
If anybody is already going to be flying over the holidays, the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, on a very practical level, the airports are getting very busy. We're almost back to pre-COVID levels of passenger traffic. So if you had flown quite a while ago and you got to the airport and it wasn't very busy and you didn't have problems checking your bags, that sort of thing, you need to start thinking about really getting to the airport, giving yourself plenty of time. Because if you're a little bit anxious to begin with, if you feel rushed, that can elevate your anxiety level, and things really are getting much busier. And so do make sure you check with your airline as far as what their time limits are for checking bags, all those practical things, just so you can get through security and be much more relaxed.
Exactly. Getting there earlier is always better than later, and keeping your anxiety down. Because if you're always bubbling along around a 1, 2, 3 level of anxiety, and if you're already at a 5 or a 6, it doesn't give you much wiggle room and to move yourself into an anxiety attack or a panic attack. So anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in again. Appreciate it. Again, I'm glad to see Dieter back safe and sound, and Diane and Eric. For the whole group here, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of Fearless Flight Live.
Yeah,
Peter, if you hadn't have made it back, that would have been the best excuse for abandoning your kids. I can't come home. I'm sorry, you guys. I just can't. I'm stuck.
You're on your own.
Well, you know what? We were on WhatsApp the whole time, so they got it blow by blow. And I'm gonna close with Jim's awesome comment. It's good to see the band back together. So
Exactly.
It's the reunion tour.
We'll see you next week, everybody.